Hello, one and all. Welcome to our Australian Grand Prix review. David and I are based in Europe. We have Neil Morrison shivering away on the ground in Phillip Island. Neil, has it been a long weekend? Has it been a bright weekend? In the end, the drama over the weather kind of subsided.
Yeah, who would have thought that podcasters making a big deal about the weather on the other side of the world wouldn't really have much of an impact on the racing at all? No one saw that coming into this weekend. But yeah, in the end, it turned out to be a bit of a big deal about nothing. I mean, we had three races on Sunday, a little bit delayed, but yeah, everything was pretty cool. So yeah, 2 thumbs up here.
Yeah, let me just check my bank balance again for the thousands of euros I spent getting to Phillip Island in 2023, and then only got half a Grand Prix. So my embittered swing towards the climate on that particular island, I think, is justified partially. Dave, how is your sleep deprivation going?
My sleep deprivation is going really well. I'm really sleep deprived.
Dave, you wouldn't believe how many people today have told me in the media centre that they're really looking forward to listening to this podcast to just hear your reaction at the fact that Raul Fernandez has won a MotoGP race.
To be fair, I have been saying for the past few GPs that he has, like the second half of this season, he has been steadily improving, not to the point that he would actually win. I think I did earlier this in the preview say that this was a race where strange things would happen, but not sure I predicted that the strange things might include Raul Fernandez actually winning.
Begrudgingly. I think that's probably the word. As ever, we're going to be chewing over what happened in the latest round of MotoGP. We've got 4 or 5 key talking points from round 19 of 2022, the season fastly approaching an end. We're also going to deal with a couple of Patreon questions that we invite through either our Patreon channel or through the Discord. If you haven't signed up yet, get on one of our tiers to get the full MotoGP treatment throughout the weekend. That includes our paddock note shows, which are recorded and posted every single day for news, views, what the riders have said, what the paddock is saying. It's all there in the paddock note shows. But first of all, Neil, without further ado, because you've been the one on the other side of the world on the ground, what's been your moment from this Grand Prix?
My moment of the Grand Prix came on Saturday when just before the sprint race was set to get underway, a seagull unfortunately lodged itself somewhere between Marco Bezzecchi's front wing and I think it was caught maybe inside his fairing. But it was a less than ideal way for Bezzecchi to start the sprint. I think he got a little bit shocked by the wildlife that he had picked up along his way. Kind of miraculously managed to put that to one side and didn't even notice it as he was herring after Raul Fernandez to overtake the Spaniard and win the sprint. And then was very apologetic to the seagull afterwards for ending its short life. I think he said, I went to do the warm-up lap and unfortunately the seagull came for a ride as well. Yeah, Bezzecchi, I mean, wildlife is always a bit of a factor, isn't it, at Phillip Island? And I think we had some earlier drama on Saturday with some seagulls getting in the way of Adrian Huertas in Moto2. And this was just another example added to, Ian One in that race in 2015 of times when, seagulls have got caught up in the action.
Dave, Neil's picked mutilation of an innocent bird as his moment of the Grand Prix. I'm not too sure what we should read into this, but it's hardly a unique thing at Phillip Island. I think Jack Miller had an even bloodier encounter last year. But yeah, I mean, it kind of set the tone for perhaps the unexpected. Well, I'm kind of contradicting myself there, but yeah, the kind of weird and wonderful that tends to happen at this race. What was your moment?
Yeah, just about the seagull. First of all, I was very pleased to hear Bez be so contrite about hitting the seagull. He was genuinely sorry, which marks him up as an actual animal lover. And it did seem like in this, when they're racing, I don't think there's an awful lot they could do about it. But just before the start, if they'd have sort of like set off, because you could see the birds all flew up as soon as everyone pulled away. If they'd have fired like a starting pistol near the birds, sort of 10 seconds or 15 seconds before the warm-up lap was about to start, it might never have happened. But anyway, it added a little bit of drama. My moment was Pecco Bagnaia during the warm-up here, coming out of the final corner and going down the front straight, and the bike just trying to shake itself to bits, a proper head shake. If anyone has ever had a head shake, well, I have had a head shake that bad, but that was because the front tire of my Honda 125 punctured, and it threw me off and into the dirt, which was not good. So yeah, it is absolutely terrifying, and also that's basically what he's been complaining of all weekend, that the bike is shaking. The same at Mandalika, and that was like a really obvious proof that the problem is not in his head, the problem is on the bike.
Dave, you and I, well, I'm saying Neil and I have head shakes every time we're on a podcast with you. So it's there's plenty of them going around, that's for sure. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it's. I also want to know: were you actually up for warm up, or was that something you just watched back?
I shall be honest. I watched. I nearly stayed up for warm up because I actually went to sleep about 10 minutes before warm up started, which is why I'm so sleep deprived.
Fair enough. My moment is kind of related because I think every time a motorcycle twitched in that 27-lap race, I thought, it was a little bit of MotoGP retro for me. It was, we don't see the bikes that sort of out of shape and wild and somewhat untamed compared to in recent seasons. And I just thought that was it was fantastic sight. You really saw the riders working for their cash today through that Grand Prix, and also. I kind of want to nominate that rear-facing camera shot of Johann Zarco's crash into turn one because it was pretty brutal. For a moment there, it looked like he was going to do a Marc Marquez style save, but then just sort of like clattered into the gravel. And in his debrief afterwards, he said, "Not a good place to crash," which I thought was, pretty much a fine summary of the whole incident. He said he had a wobble on the brakes and went wide with the wind, and that was that. But it looked phenomenal. And Johann Zarco has a little bit of a tendency for crashing at that particular part of the track. I think his collision with Marc Marquez a few years ago as well had a lot of people holding their breath. But thankfully, the Frenchman's okay. But it just added like another spectacular moment to what was the 35th Australian Grand Prix, the 29th at Phillip Island. And as Neil kind of hinted earlier with Raul Fernandez, we now have the 7th different winner in 2025 MotoGP. That's 5 races in a row where we've had a different victor. And for the second GP in a row, we've got a first timer on top of the box. I think we should just start talking about Raul. The day has come, Dave.
The day has come. I mean, as I said, he's been. He said in the press conference, like what happened for him was the Jerez test. That was the big turning point, if you like. It was the chance that he actually got to just spend on the bike, working stuff out. Obviously, he lost the pre-season after his crash or he lost the Sepang test after crashing on the first day there, and that put him on the back foot for a long time. But he did. His season has been really, it's been interesting to follow because it sort of went down. It came to a real nadir at the start of the season, and then he's been sort of slowly trying to reinvent himself, trying to put all of these pieces together. I remember in the first half of the season, he kept on saying, "We just have to put together a good weekend. We're working piece by piece. We're having to do this. We're having to do that." I think he worked a little bit. He worked a lot on himself. He had a really stern talking to by David Abrivio at some point. And this has been building and building. He had a really, really strong weekend in Mandalika, but he's been sort of knocking on the door of the top 5 and the podium for the past 3, 4, 5 races. So it's not come completely out of the blue. It's just that because it was Raul Fernandez, we haven't really noticed him. We haven't really seen him growing in the way that he has been doing. He's flown under the radar. I do think everything fell into place perfectly for him. But this was an amazing performance. It was a superb ride, and he absolutely deserved it.
Raul's story, Neil, over the last sort of 4 years, it's got to the point where he's leading or in a good position in a race and you think, okay, what's going to go wrong? I mean, that's just been sort of the trajectory of his career since he exploded out of Moto2. I mean, it's taken him more than 75 GPs to sort of get on the box, even though there was, like they've said, hints of potential with some sprint performances. Watching there on the ground in Phillip Island, was there a kind of sense of disbelief? Or, as like one of our Patreon subscribers, Craig Stanyon says, was Raul merely on the right bike at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think we need to send someone over to Dave's house to get him some tissues, because there's a whole load of humble pie that he needs to wipe off his lips and around the edges of his mouth. And I too will start eating some humble pie now, because I had written Raul off as a bit of a spent force in Grand Prix racing, if I'm being completely honest. At the start of this year, midway through this year, I hadn't been convinced by him and what he showed. And Dave's right. Circumstances played into his hands this weekend. There's no question that, without the double long lap penalty, Marco Bezzecchi, I think, was going to be the race winner. Marquez, brilliant at Phillip Island. He's out injured, but Raul still took complete advantage of the circumstances and did really, really well. I just was quite impressed with how he dealt with the expectations, because after the sprint yesterday, I mean, Bezzecchi was clearly faster, but Raul was in turn way ahead of third place. It seemed that both Aprilias just had such an advantage here this weekend. And knowing that Bezzecchi had the double long lap penalty, there's no question that Raul must have been feeling serious pressure from not just himself, but the team and Aprilia, knowing going into this race that, okay, Bezzecchi's going to probably lose about 4 or 5 seconds, and therefore I'm going to find myself in a real position of strength. And there was no sense of him buckling under that kind of strain, of that kind of pressure. And I think if you compare this race and how he managed it out front to Indonesia, where he had a very good sprint performance, and then in the race, arguably made a bit of a mess of that strategy, clearly had the rhythm to be on the podium again and probably finish second in that race, or third at the very least, but didn't quite attack at the right moments, and it was good, just got a bit messy. I think, he probably could have come away from Indonesia with 2 podiums as well. And yeah, the contrast with today, everything was just so clean. And there was a time when I was thinking, has he done too much too soon? Has he burnt out the rear tire? Will there be like a kind of a mad drop off in the last couple of laps? But he really did manage it to perfection. So yeah, hats off to the guy. And I have to say, sorry, Raul, I wrote you off and I was wrong. Not for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to point out that the circumstances fell his way, because, Bezzecchi had a double long lap penalty. And I think without the double long lap penalty, Bezzecchi would win that. Marquez, as you say, very good. Fabio Gianantonio qualified really badly and was really, really fast. Just had a really, really strong weekend. Could possibly have won. But, even then, take all that out of the equation, and you've still got a really, really strong Raul Fernandez who was going to be in the mix for the win, and definitely on the podium anyway. But again, you can only race the people who turn up on the day. And, Raul was there. Raul turned up on the day, and Raul got the job done, and absolutely hats off to it. And again, you can't take anything away from the way that he won this. He won it brilliantly.
We know that Fernandez is not a fan of pre-season testing at Sepang. It's not the first time that he's managed to spanner himself and then have to. I was going to say, I'm
not sure he knows anything much about pre-season testing at Sepang, because he keeps on spending most of it in hospitals.
Well, I mean, he took only 6 points from the first 5 Grand Prix, and he admitted this as well in post-race interviews in Australia. He said he had to build into the season. So I think you have to sort of give him that benefit and a little bit of patience, or some, like a window to show what he can do there. But I just think, this thing's been dragging on for some time now. I mean, this is the first time he's had a victory in 4 years and hasn't really come close in any Grand Prix race to get in, really, maybe even a podium at times, never mind a victory. And while I completely agree that, he sees the circumstances today, perhaps there is a little bit of Raul Fernandez that's just been hiding away, as Dave, you used the phrase perfectly, under the radar. And now I think, the guy is under pressure. He's still in his early 20s, but he's under pressure now to prove that, this is not just a Phillip Island. People are missing, people are doing long laps, and the Aprilia is awesome at this track. Vibe to the whole thing.
Yeah, Massimo Rivola, Aprilia Racing CEO, came up and spoke to the media after the race today, and obviously he was just saying what a massive impact missing the Sepang test has on a rider. You basically lose the kind of basis of understanding your machine and finding a base setting in a relatively calm environment compared to the sort of frenetic nature of a race weekend. And when he came back from injury, probably came back from injury too soon when he wasn't quite fully ready to. And then when he did come back, his teammate, who was a rookie, Ayagura, was immediately fast out of the blocks, fourth in Thailand, had a really good race in Argentina, and Raul was nowhere. And the sort of mental strain that put him under, I think, was really quite tough. Spoke to some people in the team around the time of Jerez, Le Mans, and they were saying that it was quite difficult to be around him, and they felt that Raul was almost kind of at odds with himself. Just his MotoGP career really hadn't panned out in the manner that anyone was expecting. We're talking about a rider that won 8 races in his rookie intermediate class campaign, very nearly won the title. No rider has won 8 races in their rookie intermediate class campaign, not even Marc Marquez or Valentino Rossi. So we're talking about a very, very special talent. But I think it's just taken so long for him to really come to terms with the complexity of being a MotoGP rider, dealing with things like electronic setup, being very, very good at giving detailed analytical feedback. This has not come, I think, naturally to him. It's taken some time to build that up. And hey, we're talking about a guy, okay, you mentioned in his, 75th Grand Prix his 4th season, but the guy's just still 24 years old. I mean, we're still talking about a very young rider with potentially many, many years ahead of him. And after performances like today, many years ahead of him in this class. So maybe it's not too late for Raul. Let's hope that this could maybe be a real, or this kind of last couple of months could be a real turning point for him, because I was excited about him in 2021 like I haven't been in many, many years. There's only a couple of riders coming through Moto2 that have excited me as much as Raul has, and that's probably Mark, Pedro in the last decade or 15 years. So there's a special talent there, and it's great to see that finally being fulfilled.
Yeah, I mean, he, like you said, this has come from him. Like, his problem was at the beginning of the season was Raul Fernandez, and what Raul Fernandez has fixed is Raul Fernandez. That's the real progress. The trouble is, this isn't an Alex Marquez performance, if you like. This isn't Alex Marquez 2025. This is Alex Marquez getting on the podium in his first year on the Honda at Le Mans. This is more of a surprise than something steady. And the next job and the most difficult job is for him to repeat this. If he can, spend the rest of the season, maybe the start of next season, regularly knocking on the door of the top 5, then I'll definitely start to become a Raul believer. Right now, we know he's fast. As you said, as you point out, Neil, he's just unbelievably talented. We saw that in Moto2. But translating raw talent into actual results is a completely different kettle of fish.
I think it's also an example of riders that develop at different times. I mean, I don't think every athlete can be like Pedro Acosta and just sizzle up to the top, in a space of 3 to 4 seasons. Pick an example, Franco Morbidelli, also needed a couple of years in MotoGP before he was able to show what he could do with the right team and the right package. And
Where
I
did
think
he finish today?
We're not playing, I'm saying now, but 2019, Franco, or 2020 was the man around that time. But I think also, you have to, if you're a rookie in MotoGP as well, and you're in your first or second season and you're on a motorcycle that's not from Borgo Panigale, then, if you're showing something to be at the front of the field, then you're already quite impressive. And, that's also what hints at the potential that Ayagura has, and also, of course, Pedro Acosta. So, the fact that Raul's taken time to sort his head out, sort out everything else that needs to come with being a decent MotoGP rider is admirable. I think, our friend and colleague Jack Appleyard interviewed Davide Brivio right after the race, and Brivio was almost like at a loss for words to explain Raul's win. He said, I think his phrase was, I can't believe it. And then afterwards, Jack grabbed him again after the flag show, and Brivio was saying that Raul needed more time to be a complete rider and a team member. The way he was coming back into the pit box and even giving feedback. He needed to be more of a professional, I guess, which again is something that's kind of logical for somebody that's, again, so young and come quickly through the classes in Moto3 and Moto2. So maybe his time is coming. But I will say, in a more general sense, for MotoGP guys, like we saw with Firmino Aldeguer, who was so good, at the last Grand Prix, and then coming to Phillip Island, there was a part of the cynical wise and hacks in us that knew that Aldeguer would perhaps struggle to replicate that same sort of form, even on the dominant motorcycle in MotoGP, and that turned out to be true. When we get to Sepang, if the Aprilia is not as, we're back to a little bit kind of stop and go, a lot of hard braking points at Sepang. If the Aprilia is not the motorcycle it was in Phillip Island, then Raul could be drifting back into that sort of lower top 10 that bracket. So I don't think we can sort of hail the coming of Raul Fernandez in MotoGP, but credit where it's due at the time.
Yeah, and it's not often that I have to shout you out, Ad, and give you credit, but I think there was a podcast somewhere around mid-season when you actually said you expected Raul to be the big surprise to the second half of the season, and well, he certainly has been one of them. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because for large chunks of this season, it really felt very predictable. I mean, we had the Marquez brothers dominating absolutely everything that they could in the first part of the season, and Pecco Bagnaia more often than not was in third position. It seemed all very predictable, and kind of suddenly we now have 7 different riders that have won races this year, which is fairly decent variety. I think there's only, I need to check the record books, but I think there's maybe only 5 seasons maybe in history where there's been more than 7 different riders across a full MotoGP or Premier Class season. And it's also a nice little stat, first time that we've had back-to-back races with first-time winners victorious in each of those. The last time being the Styria Grand Prix in 2020 when Miguel Oliveira won, and then San Marino GP just after in when Franco Morbidelli won. So this has been it's been a while since we've kind of had this. And also, just very briefly, 74% of our patrons voted for Raul Fernandez as the rider of the Australian Grand Prix, rather unsurprisingly. So the patrons have spoken as well.
Neil, did you manage to sort of get covered in champagne at all when you sort of wandered down to pit lane post-race? Did you find anyone to talk to?
I did indeed. I found Noe Herrera, Raul's crew chief, who was his crew chief during that Moto2 campaign with IO. And then Raul obviously went up to Tech 3 KTM, almost against his will. In fact, definitely against his will, I think we can say. And it was RNF at the time. They quite strategically signed Noe to be a crew chief in their team in the hope that they could tempt Raul to come and ride for them the following year. And that's, I think, what happened in 2023 when he first rode for it was RNF Aprilia then. It's now Trackhouse Aprilia. So yeah, bumped into Noe while celebrations were ongoing in the Trackhouse box, and this is what he had to say. So Noe, what an incredible weekend. I guess we could see signs of this in Indonesia, where Raul got his first sprint podium. But, were you surprised with just the confidence and the maturity he showed here in Australia?
Well, yes, this was the final step he needed to do for himself. He's just trust on what he can do, actually, on managing one leading race and all the sessions he did during the GP. But yes, it's a progression that he did this last event that we had here in this championship, and it's growing, and it's coming, and at the end the results are coming also. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a crazy progression from the start of the season where Raul seemed a little bit lost. Looked like the future in MotoGP could maybe be quite difficult for him, but he seems to have turned it around. What's the secret?
Yeah, well, actually, yes, as you say, in the beginning was very difficult for us. He got injured. He lost confidence on him, on the bike, on all the things. We step by step increased that for him. We, as Aprilia, improved the package step by step. Small details were improving, and this also helped him to recover the confidence. And at the end, taking some decisions, maybe in Misano test for the next events. At the end, it gave him the confidence to put everything on the track. So
Did he have to adapt himself a lot, or was it more adapting the bike to Raul's style?
I'd say that goes both, because this is not the bike, this is not the rider only. It's a complete package. The connection between them, so it's both. Obviously, Aprilia did one step forward in terms of development, but also I need to say that also Raul to get the performance from this bike. So it's all connected. Yeah.
You obviously worked with Raul during that amazing season in Moto2, so you know the kind of potential that he has. Can you maybe explain a little bit about his journey in MotoGP? There's not been the immediate adaptation, but after 4 years now, it seems like he's become a proper MotoGP rider.
Yeah, well, yes, in Moto2 we had an incredible season actually. There was purely the talent. But yes, when you make the step to MotoGP, for most of the humans, it's not that easy. You need to understand many things: electronics, management of the tires, how these bikes work to control the amazing power they deliver. So it's a kind of process. Maybe for him, obviously it took longer than he wanted, but at the end seems like arrived.
Yeah, he's arrived, yeah. And just finally, I mean, Indonesia and Phillip Island are quite unique circuits, unique conditions as well. Are you confident that you found something that can work everywhere, and this can be maybe the new normal, these kinds of results?
Yeah, well, yes, from outside can seem that Mandalika and here in Phillip Island are particular tracks, but what we have been working, especially all this season, was to make less weak our weak points, which became quite strong points from us. And the ones that we had already, which is the long corners and these points that you are imagining, we kept. So our weak points, we were working so hard with Aprilia to improve that, and obviously changed.
And those weak points for the heavy braking zones, maybe in the past that was tough for this bike.
Yeah, that is exactly that. It was the stop and go corners where we struggled on braking and also on the delivery of the power we had to control that, to don't break the grip so quick, to keep the push, let's say. Yeah.
Well, Noe, unbelievable performance this weekend. Fantastic stuff, and huge congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Good job, Neil. Great to hear from Noe, and of course, congratulations to the Trackhouse Racing MotoGP team. Now, all 11 squads on the grid have celebrated victories. So that's another little landmark for the series itself. I can't remember who said it earlier. It might have been you, Dave, or maybe even Neil, but there was an allusion that Marco Bezzecchi could have had this Grand Prix in his pocket. 2 long lap penalties, deservingly handed out for the incident that kept the world champion away from this Grand Prix. And but Bezzecchi was really strong. Got all the way back from 6th to 3rd. I mean, that's no easy feat around Phillip Island, and grabbed another podium finish. Was this Grand Prix his based on that?
Yes. I mean, it's fairly simple. Taking nothing away from Raul again, but Bezzecchi was just unstoppable this weekend. He was fantastic. He got held up by Pedro Acosta. Pedro Acosta once again managing to swap his KTM RC16 for a Volvo with a massive caravan hanging off the back, because it was bloody impossible to get past him. A lot of riders took a long time to get past him when he was significantly slow. I think Quartararo was also a bit of a roadblock at times, and that held riders up. That gave Raul Fernandez just enough room to actually push, escape, and build the lead. But Bezzecchi's been phenomenal. Really around Phillip Island. Obviously, the track suits him. Obviously, the track really suits the bike as well. We saw that yesterday. And yes, the double long lap penalty cost him. Should we say it cost him a chance of victory? Because he would have been up against Raul Fernandez. But if I had to put my money on in a straight fight round Phillip Island between Fernandez and Bezzecchi, I would put it on Bezzecchi. I'd put my money on Bezzecchi. But also considering that he's still carrying that back injury that from the crash in Motegi, the crash in Mandalika, and to be this good, genuinely very impressive. I know you hate to hear it, Adam.
No, that's not true, Dave. I think he's a good rider. He's just you
just don't want to ever have to speak to him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. No, but I mean, look, he was genuinely just a cut above the rest around it. Sometimes riders do turn up at a track and they clearly have just a step on everyone else, and that was Bezzecchi this weekend. He tripped himself up, and he also found a Raul Fernandez who was very difficult to beat.
Neil, Bezzecchi didn't smash a kangaroo or obliterate like a wallaby, but were you still quite impressed nevertheless with what he did today?
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't wiping blood off his fairing after the race. I still found a delight in his approach and his ride. And yeah, I agree fully with Dave. I was sort of doing the calculations when he did his long lap penalties. I think he lost 3.8 seconds to Raul in the 2 laps when he did his 2 long laps, and he ended up finishing 2.4 seconds back, despite being stuck behind Pedro Acosta, despite having to make moves on Alex Marquez. And did he get stuck behind Fabio? He was 6th anyway. There were times at the end of the race where he was still able to do like low 38s when everyone else was kind of like, the rear tire had gone away, and they were in the high 38s. So yeah, Bezzecchi at the end of the race was still absolutely like incredibly fast. And to be honest, the double long lap penalties maybe helped us out with what would have been maybe a processional race, because he did have a brilliant start as opposed to what we saw in Indonesia. And he really was setting a formidable pace in the early laps to try and build up a bit of a buffer before he took those long laps. One of them, I think he still could have recovered from that, but the second one really was the killer, because that was then when he got stuck behind a few of the slightly slower riders, and he just had to go into tire management mode at that point as well. So yeah, still a brilliant performance. His recovery in the sprint was incredible too. He nearly, as well as having a seagull stuck on his bike, he came close to crashing down at turn 10, had to run off track, lost a second to Raul when he was fighting there. And I think recovered about 6/10 of that deficit in 1 lap. Then overcame Raul. So yeah, really, really strong weekend. He'll be a little bit peeved, I think, to have missed the opportunity to have won here, because this was his GP. But generally speaking, I think he has reason to be happy. It's another weekend where Aprilia has excelled. They've been the class above. Massimo Rivola was saying to the journalists afterwards, in these fast-flowing tracks that we have, Aprilia is now the reference in MotoGP, and it's really difficult to disagree with that. I think Bezzecchi has been one of the big surprises of this season. I think this was in the offing from his first visit to Phillip Island on a MotoGP bike back in 2022. I think he ended the first day of that particular Grand Prix fastest, which is quite something to do the first time you're on a MotoGP bike, and just missed out on the podium that year. So yeah, we know he loves this track. Aprilia is great here, and penny for Jorge Martin's thoughts.
Yeah, the thing about the long laps, because I had to go and sort of check the rules. With a double long lap penalty, you have to do them within 5 laps, but you can't start them until you're given the all clear by race direction, which is usually at the end of the first lap. Now he did them on lap 5 and lap 7, and I was sort of wondering, hang on, wait a minute, does that count? I haven't checked this with the race direction, but I think what happens is he was shown the long lap penalty board at the start of lap 2, and so they give him lap 2 to that doesn't count against his quota of laps within which he has to do it. So then you're counting from lap 3, and that puts him exactly within those five laps. He said, I just followed the strategy of the team. I just did what the team told me, and it was exactly the right choice. Do it as late as possible so that you've got a little bit of a gap. You've got some room, and you don't lose too many positions. And especially, as Neil said, the second one, that was the really costly one, and that was what he was trying to limit the damage from.
As usual, we're able to crib notes from Matt Burt and Lewis Sotheby on the Well Feed commentary stream. And as you know, they're always full of interesting trivia and statistics. And Bezzecchi is now has the most podium finishes of any rider from Aprilia in the MotoGP era, which is a good one. And it kind of leads on a little bit, Dave, just to sort of close off the topic on Aprilia with a question from Alex Ragsdale, who asks, is the Aprilia now the best bike in MotoGP?
It is the best bike in MotoGP around Phillip Island, but it's not the best bike in MotoGP. I mean, like the Aprilia now is really what the Yamaha of sort of at its peak of, 15, 16, 17 really was. Fast enough, really flowing, capable of carrying corner speed. I still think the Ducati GP24 is a better bike. We said this on notes yesterday. What this proves is that concessions have really worked. Yesterday, we didn't have a single Ducati on the bike. But Michele Pirro was making this point as well, saying, look, because we can't test as much, we don't have so many tires, it is more difficult for us to develop, where the extra tires are extremely useful for, because extra tires means a lot more track time, and I think this is really making the difference. And it's the concessions are working as designed, helping people catch up. Look at what Honda have done. Look at how Honda have completely turned their project around in 2 years to becoming an extremely competitive bike. So I don't think, yes, Aprilia is the best bike around Phillip Island. I don't think it's the best bike on the grid yet, but I definitely think it's much closer to being, I don't know about the best bike, but for being in the discussion of being just the best all-round bike on the grid now, and next year looks interesting.
We'll come on to Ducati, Di Gia and Pecco Bagnaia in a moment, but let's just quickly talk about the KTMs first, because Pedro Acosta, great start, was fighting up with Raul Fernandez in the beginning. If he could have kept that kind of pace, you'd have to think that, he would have been in contention for victory, which is kind of was my pre-GP prediction. So I was getting briefly excited for a moment there. But yeah, Pedro Acosta, like the other three KTM riders, just struggling a lot to deal with that drop in rear tire performance. And it was something that all of them said, Paul Espargaro, Brad Binder and Enea Bastianini. And even though I think you have to credit Binder and Bastianini in coming from 16th and 20th on the grid up into the top 10, and Espargaro as well was running as high as 7th, I think, having previously scored 9th and 8th in his two other replacement appearances in 2025, then that was some going. But Callie, another subscriber and patron listener, says, I know the KTM is a challenge, but when on earth will Pedro learn to manage his tyres? I think that's been a little bit harsh on the Spaniard, because for some reason KTM haven't quite twigged how to optimize their full potential here at Phillip Island. Would you guys agree?
Yes, I think Pedro learned to manage his tyres in his Moto2 days. This is not a Pedro Acosta problem. This is a KTM problem. And as you said, Ed, all of them said this after the race. It was quite interesting what Paul Espargaro had to say, because they really started the season off badly in that regard. But they kind of got to work it out sort of in the second, around the summer break time, and just after the summer break, we saw, Pedro getting some good podium finishes and consistently being up there in the top 5. And Paul said, we kind of had an understanding of what was going on, because it's quite easy to predict how European tracks are. Like, you sort of have a general idea of how the bike will behave at most of them. Whereas you come to the flyaways and there's just, every factory has so much less data at tracks like Mandalika or at Phillip Island, that it's just more of a bit of a gamble, I guess you could say. And those problems from the start of the season have started to reappear here. Any sort of thoughts that Acosta had burned up his tire at the start of the race, it wasn't the case. He was absolutely adamant that when he was sat there behind Raul in second place after Bezzecchi took his long lap, he said he was only riding at about 70%. He was being really, really careful with his rear tire management. Yet by, I think, lap 9, he said he could already feel himself struggling slightly. And it just gradually went downhill. He was saying, at my worst track and at KTM's worst track, we still come away with the 5th place, and he's harping on about this kind of need to always be in the top 5 towards the end of the season, how important that is to find that consistency. But you have to imagine there's part of him which is just being eaten alive by the fact that, firstly, Fermin Aldeguerra's won his first MotoGP race ahead of him, and now Raul Fernandez has done the same. And we've had 7 different winners this year, and Pedro Acosta still isn't one of them. I think he's one of only maybe 4 riders on the grid now in MotoGP that hasn't won a Premier Class race. That must be eating away at him.
Yeah, that's a great point, Neil, because you don't really think of the wider picture there. And, but Acosta has been focusing so much on himself and achieving that top 5 consistency that it's easy to miss. There's a very regular pattern there, because even when he's in Q2, it's very rarely that he's emerging on the front row. It's always around that 5th or 6th position, and he's always missing, 3 to 4 tenths, on the fastest guys on Ducatis. And, while I think Acosta deserves a lot of praise for getting himself out of a bit of a mental rut, that he wasn't going to be on the level of the Ducatis in the beginning of the year. Clearly the work with the team and Paul Chirath paying off in an increase of maturity there. He must now be thinking, listen, I've had enough of this situation. Whatever I do, I'm either on the ground or I'm in the same kind of spiral, starting strongly, because the KTMs are probably still the strongest bikes on the grid when it comes to top speed and also getting off the grid. But he's powerless to do anything else. And it must be burning at him. I think a phrase he used in some of his post-race interviews was like, KTM now need to make a step. Like, he's done everything he can, both in terms of technique and his mentality. And Acosta is I don't know, kind of rapping his fingers on the table even more loudly, I think you could say. Brad Binder was saying, if you want to be a little bit more technical about their issues, that it's all to do with edge grip, and the KTMs are just burning the tire too much and too quickly. This could just be a Phillip Island phenomenon. I mean, like you pointed out, this was only Binder's 4th MotoGP Premier Class start at Phillip Island, because, due to the pandemic years, we didn't go for 2 years. And, he's one of the most experienced riders on the KTM R16. So it's a tough situation. I mean, I expect them to be much more competitive in Malaysia.
Yeah, just for what it's worth, I thought Acosta rode brilliantly this weekend. I thought he was really, really exceptional. His performance in the sprint, to be on the podium, was fantastic. I mean, to do that sort of defensive ride in Mandalika is one thing, but to do it here at Phillip Island, a completely different track. His defensive riding at the end of the sprint, how he defended from Jack Miller attacking at turn 4 through the hay shed and into Lucky Heights and then into the last corner, was really, really impressive. And today, I think did absolutely everything that he could. And when he was kind of making an appeal to KTM to up the ante a bit, he wasn't doing it in that kind of moody teenager, face like a slapped arse, mopey way that you might expect from Kevin the teenager. He was doing it in a kind of earnest way, like, I'm giving everything I have here, and he is. I think Acosta's riding from maybe a third of the way through this season has been really exceptional. And you have to think that if he was on a Ducati or an Aprilia, he wouldn't have just won one race by now. He would have won many. I think some people have been saying that we may be a bit too much on the Acosta hype train. But, just look at the stable of KTM riders, and Acosta is consistently the number one of them right now.
Yeah, just look what he's doing to his teammates and the other riders on the KTMs. The only person who's been anywhere near him was Maverick Vinales before he got injured, and that was at the start of the season. Acosta basically gave up moping and started just showing KTM what he's worth. Because the other thing is, KTM do need to step up, and the best way to show them that they need to step up is by consistently going out, putting everything on the line, showing them exactly what you as a rider are capable of, and that's what Acosta's doing. You, Adam, you said you touched on a really good point, which is that the KTM is now the fastest bike on the grid. And you really saw that. The Ducatis are struggling to get past. They're having to use a slipstream, and even then, it's still difficult to get past. That means they've got a really powerful engine. The edge grip would play into that, because it also means that they are, the more power you have, in general, the more power you have, you sacrifice that for power delivery. It becomes a little peakier. It becomes a little bit more difficult to manage. or you have to use a lot more electronics to actually manage it. And that's how you burn up tires. You burn up tires because you're not able to deliver the power smoothly to the tire. I also think that one of the big steps that KTM have made as a whole is the fact that they're now all using this mass damper on the rear, the big square box on the tail of the KTM. And the thing about the mass damper is it's just data. The only thing that you need there is from data, so that you can tune the thing and get it working at every single occasion, every single track, to actually save your tires. So we saw at the beginning of the year they were all over the place with their configurations. They're now all got one configuration. That has certainly helped them make a big step towards being more competitive. But they are clearly, is Aprilia the best bike? We don't know. Is KTM the best bike? No, absolutely not. It is clearly the third probably best bike, because Acosta is on it and showing what he can actually do with the bike. But it's just not competitive enough. It still needs work. It's still chewing through too many tires.
I've had compliments from both of you now on this podcast. I might finish my season here. Or I think, try to insist on doing more Grand Prix through the early hours of the morning.
We'll make up for it. Don't worry.
I haven't even tried to pronounce anything yet.
Exactly.
In good form. If you're also looking for some better form with your street bike, then head to renthal.com. They back us here on the Paddock Pass podcast. If you've got a bike in the garage, not just a dirt bike, then head to renthal.com and use the Fit My Bike tool to find some new components, some new quality accessories, some bars, grips, chain wheels, chains. Go and have a look at renthal.com. Thanks ever so much, guys, for helping us out on the Paddock Pass podcast. Let's move on to Ducati. Didier saving the blushes of the dominant manufacturer in MotoGP somewhat by getting on the podium in a result that he described as bittersweet, because if he had qualified better, then maybe, just maybe, he could have pushed the Aprilias and threatened the authority of the other Italian manufacturer in the class. There was an image after the race where Gigi Dall'Igna was laughing and hugging and celebrating with the VR46 crew, and I thought, how dare you, sir, get back into the pit box of your principal team and sort out the mess you currently have with your star rider on the other side of the pit box.
But it's a factory bike. Again, it's a factory bike.
Yeah, you're right. So it was maybe a little bit cruel, but there's various issues here. I mean, we'll talk about Bagnaia. We have to talk about Didier, of course, because it was his second podium finish in Phillip Island. The first coming 2 years ago is in his maiden trophy in the Premier class. And there are people, I think, talking about the Ducati sort of fortress wobbling slightly.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a sense that Ducati's grip on MotoGP is relenting somewhat. I mean, Dave mentioned this earlier, but there was no Ducati on the front row of the grid for the first time since the European Grand Prix in 2020. That was 1998 races ago, which is just a ridiculous run. There was no Ducati on a sprint podium for the first time ever. And despite that, you still have a situation where Didier could have potentially won if he had qualified better. And we were, 2 laps away from having 2 Ducatis on the podium. It was only, I think, on lap 26 or 27 that Bezzecchi passed Alex Marquez for third. So that is just a testament to how dominant Ducati have been in MotoGP over the last 3 or 4 seasons, that we're talking about this. What we have now is kind of like a bit of a blip, and maybe a bit of time for introspection for Gigi Dall'Igna and some of the top ranking engineers there. But yeah, really great race from Didier. Really solid weekend. The only thing that he could complain about was qualifying, down in 10th. A real nightmare. Qualifying so often has been his downfall this year. But this was a kind of a weekend where everything was just in the right window. His ride through from 10th to second was quite astonishing, quite excellent. So, fair play to him.
Yeah, no, nothing much to add to that. Outstanding by Didier. It's at a track where he is really, really strong, which he really, really likes, and he ruined it. But just in his qualifying, he said his second qualifying run was where he lost everything and couldn't get through. So, that was really what cost him a shot at victory.
Yeah, and interested just his approach this weekend. I'm not sure if it's just him becoming completely drained by the incessant probing from journalists on what his bike spec is, and is it a GP25? How much of his bike is a GP24 versus GP25? But he said essentially, his approach now is just to walk into the garage, see that Ducati is written on the kind of the fuel tank, and to think, right, okay, that's all I need to know. You just do what you do, engineers, and I'll get on it and twist the throttle. And maybe that's just a tactic to get us stop asking him the question. But it seems as though he's, at least the impression he's given us is that he's taken an approach which is less about being involved in the kind of the minutiae of bike setup, and it's just like, just accept that I'm going to have to ride this thing and get on and do that. And yeah, maybe that was an approach that was slightly lacking in the factory box this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, Ducati have made a rod for their own back by adding these year numbers to their models, as if there's such a thing as a GP25. So because we as journalists generally don't know very much, we just sort of like say, is it a GP25 or a GP24 without knowing any of the minutiae? Whereas what a GP24 or a GP25 is, it can be 95% of exactly the same parts. You know, there might be some GP23 parts or some GP22 parts. There can be lots and lots of parts. And the GP, you know, a GP25 that starts in sort of Qatar is a completely different beast to, or Buriram is a completely different beast to the bike they're racing now, because there's been, you know, I mean, apart from the obvious, the aero upgrades, there's been lots and lots of parts coming through. You know, they'll have revised the ride height device, they'll have changed the shock link, they'll have tweaked the top yokes, all those sort of things. Just the chassis, the frame might be a little bit better or a little bit different because they're looking for just a very, very slightly different feel. So there's not really any such thing as a GP25. I do think it's very smart for Digia to step back and let the mechanics get on with it, get the engineers get on with it. This is something that Jack Miller has said. It's also something that Johan Zarco has said. Johan Zarco has also been very, very clear. I don't care. I don't want to know what they've done to the bike. I will tell them how I feel, and it's up to them to fix it. And it is very easy for riders to get sucked in by, okay, what have you done? You know, you've added a bit of preload. I felt really good the last time you asked you added a bit of preload. Add a bit of preload, and then maybe I'll get that feeling back. When it's not. That's not the issue. The issue is that what the engineer is trying to achieve is a particular feeling, and there's 100 different ways of doing it, specific to each track. So, and that is what Digi is trying to avoid, you know, by not knowing anything about the setup.
Pekka Bagnaia, Dave, he didn't want to comment on the warm-up incident of instability that you mentioned earlier on. He's now only taken 25 points from the last 4 GPs. Oh. That 25 points coming at Motegi. He's in his worst sequence for
37.
4 years. 37.
Oh, he won the sprint.
Plus the sprint, of course. Yeah, okay. I'm just operating on Sundays now. Principal class. Yeah.
You're a traditionalist.
Yes. There we go. So there, you know, just the nice words you were saying earlier, just gone down the drain. You know, yes. So Bagnaia's in a tough place. Adrian and Lily Rose, more listeners to the podcast, were sending questions saying, where does the Bagnaia Ducati relationship go from here? Is it irreparably damaged? What do we view here? Because, you know, just from the TV shots alone, it doesn't look like the best atmosphere or chemistry inside the pit box. And how do they dig themselves out of it? I think what you were saying in a note show over the weekend, Dave, is that Sepang is the key. Because if Pecco is still in a position, I think his quote post-race was, I was not going to finish last again. You know, he was going to try, he was going to crash, you know, and he was determined not to be at the back of the pack. If we're in this situation as well in Malaysia in 7 days' time, then ring the alarm bell.
No, 100%. I mean, like, Sepang to me is much, much more important, or it's much more significant than certainly Mandalika and to an extent Phillip Island. The reason I picked that massive wobble that he had on the straight during warm-up as my moment is that illustrated very, very clearly what his problems were. Again, it's if you have the MotoGP video pass, a great thing to do is to pick one of the bikes and watch from the onboard. You could see, for example, the difference between Alex Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia. Both bikes were moving around quite a lot. I think I can't remember if it was DJ or Alex Marquez who said, basically the engineers had told him if your bike isn't wobbling, then you're just not going fast enough around Phillip Island. But what was happening to Bagnaia was just horrendous. It was clear. He said afterwards, we went in a direction in the warm-up and that proved to be the wrong one. And then during the race, he felt he could ride much better. It was still nowhere where it should be. But he also said, as he was coming forward, as he was sort of coming through, because he had a decent or decent-ish race. He said he was as fast as some of the guys at the front. But the bike was a lot more difficult to ride. What they've done is stiffen it up. I mean, when I was watching it from on board, I was thinking it looks like he's got a broken steering damper or something. So what they've done is change the geometry, change the steering damper, change the suspension, whatever they've done. They've changed the bike to make it much more stable. But that means it's much more difficult to actually get the thing to turn, to get the thing to...
Yeah, he said it was heavier, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. And that means that he's got they've turned it into a much more stable bike. But that gave him more confidence. Bagnaia's biggest problem is just a lack of confidence. He needs to rebuild his confidence so that he can sort of start to work towards some progress again. Saturday was an absolute disaster, but I would say that the race on Sunday was not a disaster. I think it was just, it was a mediocre race. That's it to me. And the relationship with Ducati is anyway. There's lots of people saying, will he be on a factory Ducati next year? Of course, he's going to be on a factory Ducati next year. They can't do anything about it. Will he be on a Ducati in 2027? Well, it depends which Ducati it is, because obviously Ducati are going to sign Fabio Quartararo or possibly Pedro Acosta for 27.
You heard it here first, David Emmett, laying down the predictions. Fine job.
Paul out again. God help us all.
Yes.
Sorry, it's these trousers.
On the Paddock Pass podcast, we like to have cute, fluffy penguins, but we also have seagulls that we like to jam into the anatomy of motorcycles. So we're going to move on to our hire and fire categories of the show. Neil, coming to you first. Who's your hire? Who's your pick for this category?
Who's my cute, fluffy penguin? Yes. Is that what you're asking? Well, it is the not so cute and fluffy Senna Agius. He's more a kind of battle-hardened, no-nonsense Aussie. And what he did in the Moto2 race today, in fact, what he did in the Moto2 round this weekend was just really impressive. He was comfortably the fastest guy on Friday afternoon. It was clear in that session that he had the rhythm to beat everyone in this race. And despite having that sort of expectation on his shoulders coming into this race, he just handled it like a real seasoned veteran, seasoned pro. Escaped the kind of chaos. There was a brilliant race for second place going on behind him, and he managed to escape that madness and just ride off into the distance. And it really became a sort of battle between Senna and himself, trying to keep his own concentration. And we've seen such a marked step up from him in 2025, in just his second year in the class. I think it is important to state that he is just, 20 years old still. And this is just his second year racing in the World Championship. He didn't come through Moto3. He's still very inexperienced. I still think there's aspects of his approach which he is learning, as you are at that age. I still think there is GPs where things seem to go slightly awry on a Sunday, and he's at a bit of a loss to explain what exactly has happened. There's maybe one or two aspects of how he communicates with his team that I've heard could maybe be improved and that he's trying to work on at the moment. But I mean, on the basis of his performances, his good performances this year, you have to say this guy is the real deal, and he's going to be a MotoGP rider in 2027. I'm pretty convinced of that. And yeah, how he dealt with everything this weekend and how he just rode off into the distance, his second win now of the season. Really impressive. So fair play to Senna. He gets my pick.
Two massive predictions on the 2027 MotoGP market from the Paddock Pass podcast here. It is the most interesting thing to me about Santa Ages. We've got what we're seeing in Moto2 is people coming through from alternative routes, which is really interesting and really good. Seeing Santa Ages come through from, I think, European Moto2 Championship, seeing Manu Gonzalez, starting off in the World Supersport 300 and then coming through via that route. It's that has to give you hope, because it means there is still a route into MotoGP outside of the tried and trusted route of FIM Moto3 Junior World Championship, Moto3 and all the rest of it.
As we said on an earlier show, Senna took his first podium finish in Grand Prix racing at Phillip Island, so he went one better and took the win this weekend. I hope it's not like a sort of Joe Roberts style result where we're going to see him struggling again at Malaysia, because Moto2's had quite a few of those weirdo sort of classifications this year. But I completely agree with everything that Neil says. I mean, the potential is fierce. And my hire is actually two-pronged. The first one, kind of related to Moto2, Diogo Moreira, whoever sort of like at HRC managed to get that contract in front of him and get it signed. Fair play, because the Brazilian, again, I thought was incredibly impressive in that race. And I want to ask the both of you now, who's going to win that championship? Because there's only like a seagull feather between Manu Gonzalez and the Brazilian. Any particular bold statements?
Yeah, I mean, I think Moreira was 60 points behind Manu Gonzalez at one point this season, and now it's down to 2. So momentum is certainly on his side. But I think how Manu kind of turned his weekend around from Friday morning this weekend was actually quite impressive. And the fact that he was even up there fighting with Moreira in the first half of the race was quite impressive. This hasn't been a great track for him in years gone by. I think Malaysia is so important for him to try and regain some of that initiative in the championship fight. It's going to be a massive weekend for Manu, and just what a brilliant race. Like what an exceptional sort of sight that was, to see the two title contenders just knocking absolute lumps out of each other. That is what we want to see. So yeah, I mean, fair play to both of them.
Dave, Colin Vaya can't win the title, but who do you fancy out of those two?
I genuinely have no idea. It is quite open. I think I would give it to Manu Gonzalez.
Now.
Some
Yes, definitely. No, I'd give it to I'd give it to Manu Gonzalez, but more for the solid way that he has been throughout the champion. It feels like Gonzalez has been more consistent.
My second sort of, I mentioned my hire was two-pronged. Davide Brivio, I think you've got to give him complete props for the influence he's had on MotoGP, the riders he's worked with, the teams that he's built. I think he is an important component of what Raul Fernandez has been able to achieve, going from a sulky, immature racer who really just lost his bearings in this competition to now a Grand Prix winner. So props to the Italian and to the whole Trackhouse Racing crew as well. So that's my one. When we come to poultry, unfortunate flying animals, Dave, who's your fire?
My fire is Franco Morbidelli and/or Pecco Bagnaia. I mean, it's too easy to say Pecco Bagnaia. So I'm going to say Franco Morbidelli, who I believe turned up in Phillip Island, but I don't remember seeing anything about him at all this weekend. So
I was here, and I don't remember seeing anything of him.
Yeah. I mean, he's on the best bike on the grid, and he's riding around in the back, and there's probably reasons for it, but it's just it's just been a completely miserable weekend.
Neil?
Jorge Martin is my fire, even though he isn't in the paddock in Australia. Jorge must be looking.
Yeah, a bit harsh. Jeez.
No, because he has done himself out of the chance of 2 podium potential finishes in his first year, and to have continued that upward trajectory in his first campaign with Aprilia. And obviously that mistake in Motegi must still be really, really hurting, because the Aprilia has been the best bike comfortably in the last 2 race weekends. These 2 circuits are Jorge Martin tracks completely. No one is faster than Jorge Martin and Mandalika and Phillip Island over the last couple of years. Martin has been a level above, along with Marquez. I mean, maybe he might not have had something from Marco Bezzecchi or Raul Fernandez, but I think he would have had enough at least to be on the podium today. And it's just a real case of what could have been for the reigning world champion, or the ex-world champion, I guess we say now, because Mark has won the championship.
All Aprilia podium, that really would have been quite, then we really would be talking about, is Aprilia the best bike on the grid?
My Australian Seagull is going to be for a man who had a similar kind of bloody experience of one, Jack Miller. On a day when, I think Australian road racing looks in pretty decent shape, thanks to Joel Kelso's full-blooded attempt to try and take victory in Moto3. Jose Antonio Herrera, the world champion, taking his 10th victory of the season, and helping Red Bull KTM Mayo complete the set when it comes to that particular category. And there was just a sense of Jack where he was maybe pushing a little bit too much in those first laps. When you see the trajectory or the course of the race for the Yamahas, especially Fabio Quartararo, starting from pole position and then drifting all the way back to P11. And I think that was quite an indictment of, sadly, where Yamaha are at this particular track. After some bright sort of speed in qualification, just that longer race distance and the tougher wear on the tyres not going too well with the M1, and then Jack crashing out. I mean, of course, we weren't there. Maybe you were, Neil. You got a bit of a vibe or a feeling for it, but there must have been a collective groan around the circuit when, Jack hit the floor. Yeah, he'll get another chance next year. And he was also quite effusive about, the state, as I said, of Australian MotoGP racing with the other riders in the other categories. So, but I'd also like to give a kind of black mark also towards Ducati management, because as we alluded earlier, I think a glorious 2025 season with Marc Marquez is in danger of tailing off, because it's probably and quite unlikely that we're going to see Marc again, in full fitness in MotoGP this year, which means they're going to have to try and find like a fourth leg for their other former decorated world champion, and to finish the season on a bright spot. I mean, we're only hours and days away from Bagnaia potentially throwing this thing 180 and winning again like he did in Motegi. But it's still looking a little bit like a golden year, and coming towards the end of the 1000cc era is getting a little bit sticky. So, GG, Davide, you guys, you took a hell of a battering. I think you're going to have to sort of, find another way.
Yeah, your best bike only finished in second. You took one hell of a battering.
Well, there's 6 of them now.
Yeah. On the other hand, this is an opportunity, because it does mean they haven't got Marc Marquez, masking the deficiencies. They can't sort of like point to Marc and say he can ride it.
Did anyone from our Patreon channel correctly predict that Raul Fernandez would win?
We have some incredibly knowledgeable patrons, as you well know, and not one of them predicted that Raul was going to win today's race. A lot of them were a lot closer than my prediction, which was Fermin Aldeguer, who finished in checks, notes, scrolls down the screen 14th. Another indication of me knowing very little about the sport I've dedicated my life to. But we did have some that correctly predicted Marco Bezzecchi's position, because we asked what that was going to be as one of the questions on our predictions post. Graham Norton, the enigmatically named 47, DJ Purchase and Mike Cross all correctly predicted that he would finish in third. We also asked what was the strangest bit of wildlife that was going to cross the Phillip Island track this weekend. And Adam Cole said Neil dressed as a koala. Graham Norton suggested it would be Dave dressed as a wallaby. Both were correct. Well, I was dressed as a koala, at least. Dave,
I was at home dressed as a wallaby. Does that count?
Yeah, exactly. And we also asked how many times you gents would bore on about the fact that we're racing here in October instead of February in podcasts.
You haven't finished the podcast yet, Neil.
Exactly, yeah. And basically whoever said many, many, many times, I think that was Craig Stanion. Well, Craig, you are absolutely correct. And that's
When
what's
it
on
comes,
the recorded show. You want to hear what these guys are like when we stop recording.
yeah, in WhatsApp groups. Let's finish off the podcast with our grades. Dave, you first. And what's your notation for this one?
My grade is an 8, and that's disappointing for Phillip Island
Wow.
because Phillip Island should always be 11 out of 10, and it wasn't. It's still a good race. It's still, it was an interesting, intriguing race. There was lots and lots of stuff going on. There was some good passing. There was some good blocking. There was, as you pointed out, the bikes were moving around. That's what a motorbike is supposed to look like, instead of just being this, F1 car on wheels. Thank you, Gigi Delinia. But yeah, it was enjoyable. I mean, it also helped that I didn't actually get up at God knows what time to watch Moto 3 and Moto 2. I shall watch them at some point during the week because I do believe they were quite entertaining. But good solid weekend.
I'm going to give it a 6.5.
Ooh,
yeah,
this is unusual. Normally, it's us saying, you're the positive one. What's going on here, Adam?
Yeah, just change the fucking date. Just change the date. You rolled the dice and you got away with it this time. You had to nudge the race back an hour. There's always some kind of flex when it comes to the Australian Grand Prix. Let the best track in the world have the best possible chance of putting on the best possible spectacle. I'm going to finish it there. Okay, so 6.5, 37,000 attendance. I'm not sure where that ranks in recent years for Phillip Island, if it's better or...
No, it's fairly average. Yeah, it's par for the course.
Okay. You're literally that Simpson meme. Old man yelling at Clark. That is what you're literally what you are.
Hang on, Neil. You'll get your shot in a moment. So, and 2026 is the last year of the contract at Phillip Island. So, I don't know how far Dorna managed to progress any extension talks this weekend, or it's going to have to wait another year, or there's going to be any potential for change. But yes, please change it. There we go. Neil?
8.5, because I agree with Dave. It wasn't a classic MotoGP race in the sort of Phillip Island tradition, where we've had like some of the best races of all time anywhere at this track. It certainly, I wouldn't classify today's MotoGP race as that, but as Dave said, interesting. We've had another new winner. We've had a bit of a shake-up in MotoGP lately, which I'm all in favour of, even if it's at the expense of Pro Marquez, who's healing at home in Spain, and we want to obviously see him back on track and back at racing as soon as possible. Brilliant Moto 2 race, really interesting Moto 3 race as well. Joe Kelso, giving the home fans something to cheer, as well as Senna Aegis, pushing Jose Antonio Riley the whole way. I thought we had a really good sprint race as well. Exceptional qualifying sessions all the way through Saturday. Decent crowd by Phillip Island standards, and despite the weather, we still managed to get away with running everything just 1 hour in delay, so really not that dramatic. My first time
only had to delay it.
Yeah, by 1 hour. Oh wow, woe was me, Dave. Yeah, 1 extra hour in bed as well on a Sunday morning. So can't complain. It was also just quite nice being here and speaking to some of the local fans who are fans of the show, which was also really cool. So it was nice to meet those people. And what's not to love about coming to Phillip Island? You should really try it sometime, Dave.
Amen to that.
My silence speaks volumes. It's a long way away. It's the long way away. And if Carlos Espeleta is prepared to change the date and make it in February, I'll go to Phillip Island. Oh,
there we go. That's an incentive if you need one. Malaysia next. Neil, when are you going to be on the ground in Kuala Lumpur? Wednesday. Oh, all right. It's a couple of extra days in Melbourne then before you have to change your wardrobe and transition to a slightly more tropical climate. I'll see you there. Paddock Plus Podcast will be back with our note show on the Thursday. Don't forget to check out our Patreon channel for more content and our Discord channel where we'll be chatting through some subjects post-GP and other things we saw throughout the course of the weekend at Phillip Island. Neil?
Steve Inglis has got an exclusive interview with potential World Superbike champion Toprak Razgatlioglu. We're recording this during, I think, the Superpole race, and I've just been sent a message by my mum saying that Nicolo Bulliga has knocked Toprak off. So who knows how that's going to play out. But we will have an exclusive interview with Toprak, plus some other exclusive content coming up on our Patreon channel, as well as our note show. So go over to patreon.com/Paddock Pass Podcast, sign up, become a Paddock Insider, and there'll be a whole host of interesting content for you to enjoy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks very much for listening and for watching. We'll be back soon from Malaysia.